guys, in this lecture we are going to practice some stuff which we have learned in the previous lecture. Okay, so let's get into it. So by now I think you already know like why all these things work this way, right? But to make sure you understand everything 100%, we will practice this once more. Okay, let me just comment it out quickly. Okay, so now again I will create a new variable. Let let's say first name, and we'll make it Raunak, and then this time I'll use friend's name something else. Let friend's name equals to, for now let's store this first name as a value for this. Okay, so by now I think you have already understood, since we are storing the same variable which we have created already as a value for this new variable, so it will not create a new address in memory, right? It will simply point to this address value, right? So let's log it out. Let's log out first name. Okay, yeah, and then let's log out friend's name as well. Okay, so now we are getting both the values as Raunak, right? So let's change this first name from Raunak to something else. Let's say Raj this time. Okay, so by now you already know why it is giving first name as Raj and friend's name as Raunak. It is simply because the first name started pointing to the new address which holds this as a value, right? And the friend's name is still pointing to the address which holds this value, right? So far so good. Okay, so now let's see an example of object once more. So we'll copy this and then we'll paste it. User one details, we have this name, year of birth, and we are using const. Okay, and we will use the same thing, user two details. In user two details we have stored user one details as a value, so again it will not create a new address, it will point to the same address which holds this as a value. All right, and if you remember, this will get stored in a heap which have some address, and that address will be stored as a value in the call stack for some address, right? It will be like this: in call stack address which points to heap address, and then that heap address means we have address in heap which points to, which holds the object. All right, so in call stack we get some address which holds the address of heap as a value, and that address of heap will be nothing but the address which got generated in the heap for that particular object. Okay, so now these two objects are pointing at the same address. All right, that means if I change something in this one, it will reflect in user two details as well, and if I change something in user two details, it will reflect in user one details as well. Let's have a quick look at that. I will change user two details dot year of birth again to 1998, and it will again log out the same thing in both the objects, right? See, we got 1998 in both the objects, but if I comment it out, we will get 1992 in both the objects. And there is one more thing which I wanted to show you, which we have discussed already in previous lecture, which is this const. We are using const and we are using this variable which holds some value, right? So what I said in the previous video, like we are not changing the value of this variable directly, right? I am changing the value which is inside of this particular object. All right, so that is why we are not getting any error in the console, because see, I'm not changing this object, or I'm not changing this object with some value for this key. I'm just changing the value of the key which is inside this object, right? That means I am not generating a new address for this variable. It is still pointing to the same address which holds the same heap address as a value. Okay, so if I do something like this, let me show you quickly. If I comment it out and if I do something like this, we have already stored this user1 details in user2 details. If I try to replace user2 details value, let's say with array, an empty array, then as you can see, we started getting that error, like assignment to constant variable at line number 282, which is this line, right? So this time we are trying to replace the value of the address which this identifier is pointing to right now, right? But in this case we are not doing that. We are changing the value of an object which is stored in heap. That means it is totally fine. We are not changing something in call stack. All we are doing is we are changing some keys in the heap. Okay, so now what if I want to achieve, like I want to change some value in the year of birth in user2 details, but I don't want it to reflect in user1 details. For that, what we can do is the question here, right? So there are two ways in which we can do this. One way is we can do a shallow copy. We can create a shallow copy. And how we can create a shallow copy? Let's create a user3 variable. Okay, let's comment it out. User3. And what we will do, we will use object.assign. Object.assign. So what this will do, you have to pass one object and you can pass the object whose properties you want to merge with this object. For example, user2 details properties I wanted to merge with this object, and altogether it will give you a new object, okay, with all the properties which you have merged. For example, in user2 details, or let's say user1 details for sake of simplicity, in user1 details we have these two keys, name and year of birth, right? So these two keys will be there along with the within the new object, we can say. Okay, so this time it will create a new address which will hold some keys, right? It will not point to the same address like this user2 and user1 details are pointing to right now. So with this, what we can do, we can go ahead and we can change the value of the keys here. Since it is not the means it is not pointing to the same object anymore, it is pointing to the new address. That means we can change the property value, right? So let's log user3 details as well. Okay, so this time, as you can see, we got the year of birth as 1998. And let's change one more thing, that is name. Let's make it Aviral. Okay, with a capital A, obviously. Yeah. So now, as you can see, user 3 details have the updated values, but this time these things are not reflecting in the old objects because we have created a copy of it. Okay. So what it will do, it will return a new object with the updated values, or we can say merged object values. Okay. So this is one of the way which we can use to copy an object, um, to modify its keys basically, right? Because in some cases you want, and obviously you don't want like the changes which you have done for one object reflects to all the objects which are out there, right? In some cases you want it to happen, but in some cases you don't want the changes to be reflected in all the objects which you did for some specific object, right? So in that case we can use this copying of the object. So this is one way, and there is another way. Let's comment it out, or let me comment this one. We can use a spread operator. We will use the object literals like it is a fresh object, and then we will spread the keys of this user1 details, and it will work the same way as the object.assign does, right? So now we can update the keys of one object and it will not reflect the changes, the updated value of the key in the rest of the objects like user2 details and user1 details. But the way which we have used here right now is called shallow copying. Okay, let me write it down here for your reference. So there are the concepts in JavaScript called shallow copying and deep copying. So what shallow copying does, it basically copies let me write here itself so it will be easy for you guys to understand. Okay, it basically one level of the properties, and we have a concept called deep copying or deep cloning. Let me write the example for this shallow copying as well. We can use object.assign and then for deep copying, basically what it does, it creates a complete clone of the object. Okay, and I know guys, it will be quite confusing for you, so let me illustrate this example here. What is shallow copying, what I mean by shallow copying? So right now what you have seen is like I have copied this object. Let me use the previous example itself using this object.assign, right? We only had like two keys, it's just a simple object. But what about the nested object? Let's say we have nested object which holds some key, or let's say friends array we can use. Friend 3 equals to JSON. Okay, So we will make it as more friends data. So right now we have two keys and then we have a nested object inside of it. That means an object inside of an object. Okay. And let's add one more field called friends. It will be an array. Let's say new friends. In case we made new friends, then we will push it here itself. Okay. And more friends data we will add here. So I know it doesn't make sense, but for the sake of example I've created this because this array is also a kind of object, right? And we have this object as well. So right now in this object we have two more things fields, like this more friends data which holds an object, and new friends which also holds an array. So what shallow copying does, it will copy these two keys, but it will not create um, a new address for these two fields. That means the the new object will still point to the old object's address for these two keys. That means if I manipulate these two keys in the new object, it will reflect in all the objects. Okay. So now let's see this. So we have user 3 details, right? Where we have copied user 1 details. Now let's push something in user 3 details friends array. Friends, it's friends, or what was that? New friends. Okay, new friends dot push I'll use here, and I will push something like Raman. And as you can see already, we started getting an array with the name Raman in all the three logs. That means in user 1 details, user 2 details, user 3 details. That means it copied all the first level properties properly, but it simply pointed to the old address for these two keys. It never created new properties for these two keys. That is why if you are changing anything in new friends key, it is reflecting in all the objects. Okay. So this is called shallow copying, where it will just copy the one level of first level of properties. It will not create a deep clone. That means it will not create a nested copy. Okay. And now let's use this more friends data. Let's see what we can do here. More friends data dot, what we can say, friend 3 friend 4 we can use, right? Dot friend 4 equals to David. Okay. Now if I expand this, in more friends data we have friend 3 as Jason and friend 4 as David. If I expand user 2 details, here also we will get more friends, friend 3 as Jason and friend 4 as David. That means this user 3 details is still pointing to the old address for this object, right? And old address for this object. That is why if we are changing anything for this more friends data and new friends array in the user 3 detail object, which we have copied already, it is still reflecting the change in the user 2 details object and user 1 details object. That means it is not creating a nested copy of it. It is not creating a deep clone, right? It is just creating a shallow copy which contains these first level fields only. Okay. So this is all about shallow copying. Since the deep copying or deep cloning is out of the scope of this section or this lecture, so for the sake of learning we will see like obviously we have to use some external libraries like Lodash or something to make a deep clone, because this is something little complex than shallow copying, right? Shallow copying, for shallow copying we can simply use this object.assign or this workaround. But deep copying is a little complex topic, so for that we need to use some external libraries. So this is it for this lecture, guys. And yeah, I must say, like, by reaching the end of this section, you have already gained a lot of knowledge which most of the freshers out there doesn't have. Alright, so congratulations for achieving this milestone, guys. And with this, let's see you in the next section. Okay, so see you there.